Hey guys, welcome back to Raise RC. So we got another review going on today, and it is the review of the Protrac suspension kit by Proline. This is basically step number 2 in my Slash 2-wheel drive build series. Started with basically a bone stock brushed slash high center gravity short course truck, and in step 1 we upgraded to the LCG chassis, as you can see here. Step 2, I basically added the Protrac suspension kit. So a quick overview of what this kit does. It basically is a set of new arms and shock towers for the truck. So it comes with front arms, front shock tower, rear hubs, and then also all the camber links. So pop off the wheels real quick. And why would you buy this kit? Well, the primary function, as I kind of mentioned in my preview video, is that basically I was looking to get rid of the the number 2 flaw, I think, with this truck. The number 1 flaw, in my opinion, is the high center of gravity chassis. That thing's terrible. The second biggest flaw, in my opinion, is basically the different wheels, front and rear. So the regular Slash 2-wheel drive's got sort of wide offset front wheels and a little more narrow offset rear wheels. That means they're incompatible. You can't swap them front to back. Just kind of a dumb design. So what the Protrac suspension kit does is basically widen all 4 corners, moves them out about 10 millimeters, allows you to basically run the same wheels on all 4 corners, basically the zero offset wheels, as they're called, compatible with the low C short course trucks and the Techno short course trucks. So in addition to just widening the arms, they basically also added material to everything. So everything is quite a bit sturdier, thicker, beefier, should be more durable. I haven't really had too many breakage issues with this truck so far, but this should add a little more durability. And then in addition to that, the shock towers are also a little bit different. For example, this front shock tower's got the cross member here. The other nice thing about the shock towers is they actually have more mounting holes for all of your suspension components, or your shocks, I guess, your camber links. So multiple tuning options there, front and back. And then the last thing they basically add are these rear hubs. Basically provide a lot more adjustments and a little more durability. They're quite a bit beefier as well. So you obviously need longer camber links when you add those extra arms. So it's got a set of 6 camber links all the way around. They use a 5mm turnbuckle wrench rather than the stock 4mm wrench. It's kind of an annoying size because no one else really uses that size, but it does include a little steel wrench for you to make those adjustments. So how'd this build go? Well, it's not a difficult installation. It took me about 2 to 3 hours. I'd say 2 hours if you're pretty quick, 3 hours if you run into some issues or you're making other changes at the same time. And the build overall is okay. Not great, not terrible. There's no instructions included with the kit, so you basically kind of have to figure it out on your own. Fortunately, they actually have a couple of videos online that you can check out on YouTube or on the Proline website. They actually walk you through the front installation of the arms and shock towers in the rear as well. And then there's it's actually useful to watch, I think, because there's some good tips in there. For instance, it comes with 4 screws. It doesn't really tell you where the screws go, but they actually go here on the rear shock tower to mount the rear shock tower down, because it's a little bit taller, and so you need a little bit longer screws. In addition to that, some other tips I can suggest is to basically walk through everything one step at a time. So just do one arm, one turnbuckle, even one ball cup at a time. If you like remove everything, tear everything apart, and then try to put it back together, you're gonna get lost. You're gonna have your turnbuckles on backwards or whatever. Even the orientation of the ball studs need to be checked or double checked, because they're not the same on both sides, and they're not even the same front to back. So definitely just work on things one at a time. Make sure you're threading the ball cups on correctly on the same thread as they were originally, and you should be okay. Now I did come into across kind of a build issue, kind of a serious issue, I'd say. The front arms do not mount onto the front bulkhead very well at all. They're like super tight and have like not enough room basically to get it onto this gray, sort of bulkhead or hinge pin brace. So what you see here, this little gray piece, the arms kind of go around, the hinge pin goes through. It's too tight. You actually have to grind stuff down, So I took a drill and actually ground down the front bulkhead a little bit. You know, otherwise it's really just jammed on there, and it's binding like crazy. The stock arms fit fine, so it's not really a problem with the bulkhead. It's really something wrong with the arms. But since, you know, if I break an arm, I'm going to replace it with another arm, I decided to grind down the bulkhead rather than the arms, just so that when I swap something out, you know, I don't have to grind it again. So kind of a one-time thing. But yeah, those are way too tight. So double check that on your kit if you buy a set of these. Everything else went through okay. The front caster blocks, the rear hubs, everything mounted on okay. So overall the build, you know, I wish they had instructions. I wish the parts fit a little better. It's not something that, you know, you can, that's going to prevent you from installing it, but it's kind of annoying, you know, and I wish they did a little better job with that. But fortunately, they do have some videos, so that's a nice little touch. So what else does the kit actually do? The other thing you'll notice is basically that the shocks mount very vertically, and I'm not really sure why they did this. You know, they talk about, well, you widen the arms, and then you also have to widen the shock mounts, and you know, I can get on board with that, but they also made them like super vertical. I don't know why. I mean, pretty much every other kit you'll see on the market has really more diagonal shocks. So that's a Proline thing. I'm not really sure it's better or worse, but something I just kind of noticed, and you know, maybe not such a good thing. Other changes that you'll notice is that if you buy like certain aftermarket parts, they may not fit right. I think somebody makes rear, front and rear sway bars, but the shock tower is a little bit wider. They may not mount the same. You'll have to double check that. So that could be another disadvantage. Other than that, you know, in terms of how it changed the driving experience, you know, it was a little bit surprising me. So what I would say is, you know, I mounted this up. I mounted on, you know, basically these new wheels and tires. I'm running sort of dirt webs on short course wheels. And what I would say is kind of off the bat, you know, the car drives a little differently. And let's kind of talk about what wider arms do, okay? Not that I'm necessarily an expert on this topic, but I do own other cars with actually adjustable arms, you know, like my TLR 22 3.0, you can adjust where the arms mount, so you can effectively, you know, lengthen or shorten the front arms on the kit, and it does actually affect how the car drives. From what I gather and in my own experience, what I've felt is that longer arms basically kind of smoothen out the track a little bit. You get a little bit less roll. You know, I think the long arms kind of makes the car a little more stable. You know, that's sort of the pros, I would say. On the cons, or sort of the downside of the longer arms, in general, I found that vehicles with shorter arms actually tend to be a little more aggressive steering wise, a little more nimble. You know, when you compare, for example, low-C trucks, for example, the short course or the stadium truck versus associated trucks in both the short course and stadium truck, the associated kits tend to have shorter arms and kind of wider offset wheels. The low-C vehicles tend to have, you know, wider arms and more, you know, inset wheels. And in general, I think, you know, in my experience, I found that associated vehicles tend to be a little more aggressive, a little more steering, a little more, you know, sort of all-around nimbleness. Whereas low-C cars tend to be a little more stable, a little more forgiving, a little more docile. So mounting these up, I mean, I did feel that there was less roll, and maybe the steering was slowed down a little bit. So right off the bat, if you just plug and play and mount everything kind of to the original shock locations and camber links and that kind of thing, I think that's what you're going to notice. It's going to be more stable. It's going to be more docile. There's going to be less roll, which you know, is sort of a double-edged sword, right? You know, is roll good or bad, right? If I ask you that question, is roll good for your car, is roll bad for a car? Well, it actually depends, right? You actually need a certain amount of roll to get the car to handle. The higher the traction, the higher the grip you have with your tires, you're going to be able to run with less roll. The car will be more reactive. You'll have traction. But if you're running that on really loose conditions, really, you know, soft dirt, low traction, you actually need a little more. Your car can't just rail around the corners. When you're going around a corner, you know, you can only basically get as much speed as what the traction will provide. Beyond that, you're either going to slide or your truck's going to roll. So actually rolling a little bit actually will in general provide a little more traction on that particular corner it's rolling to. Now, if you roll too much, you can actually obviously traction roll, but you also can overload that one particular wheel. So you really need the right amount of roll for the amount of traction you have and kind of the tuning or behavior you're looking for in a vehicle. So roll is not a good or bad thing. It's just you got to match it properly with what you're trying to do. So this truck with the longer arms, I do think it rolls a little bit less. With the LCG chassis, it also rolls a little bit less. And so straight out of the bat, I wouldn't say it really drove that much better. But here's the interesting thing, right? If you do a little bit of tuning, if you kind of play with the shocks a little bit, if you got the right tires, if you kind of mess with the camber links, you can actually get a whole lot more out of this truck. So that was kind of the surprising part with this truck. I thought plug and play, okay, it's, obviously they've done their homework, they've made the arms longer, you get, corner matched tires and wheels, so you can run the same thing on every side. That's good. But you kind of expect, okay, this is going to be faster overall. And I wouldn't say it's faster, it's just that it has more tuning adjustments. And that's what I would say, actually, you get a lot out of this kit that I wasn't really expecting. These holes actually provide a lot of adjustments. The stock front shock tower, for example, only has basically the one hole for the front shocks and basically one hole for the camber link, and that's it. You can't adjust anything. Same thing with the rear. The rear hubs, you only have one hole to mount the camber link, so you have no adjustments there. On the shock tower, you only have two holes basically for the camber link. Excuse me. For the shock towers, you only have one hole. So the kind of the hidden value I think you get out of this kit is all those adjustments that actually do make a difference. Now, in addition to those adjustments, I found that, okay, I got the thing set up, I've got the tires mounted, I've got the original shocks on, and it drove, sort of okay, kind of about the same. I wouldn't say really much better or worse. But once I started playing with the shocks, once I started getting the right springs, once I started getting the right shock oil, once I started messing around with location stuff, it drives better for sure. It's a better driving car. I think it can carry more corner speed, just sort of as empirical data. With the stock truck and LCG chassis, I was running laps kind of in the 21.5 second range. With the Protrac kit, with some tuning on adjustments and stuff, with a suspension setup, a shock setup I have here, I basically dropped a second off my lap time. So that I think is fairly indicative of what I was getting with all those changes. Now, for sure, better tires makes the biggest difference. If you're not running those, crappy stock tires, you're going to get way more performance just on tires alone. But now you can use that performance, now you can use that extra traction, and I think you can get the truck down a little bit. So I'm not completely done with tuning. I spent about 3 or 4 hours at the track basically just working on setup with the Protrac suspension, and what I basically come up with, kind of walk through my truck real quick. Front shock positions. Now, I'm sorry I'm talking kind of quick. This is kind of a long video, but I think it's going to be interesting. Now, the number one problem with this truck, the high center of gravity chassis. Okay, we fixed that. The number two problem with this truck, the different wheels, front and rear. Okay, we fixed that with the Protrac suspension. What is the number 3 biggest issue with this truck, in my opinion? And nobody ever talks about this, but it's actually pretty important. Take a look at the droop. And by droop, what we're basically saying is how far the wheels come down from the chassis. And you'll see, in the front, there's hardly any droop at all. I would say actually, if you look at straight on, basically the wheel hex is here and the chassis, is right here, right? There's like no droop at all, literally, like maybe, a few millimeters. In the rear, it's quite a bit different. You actually have quite a bit of droop. You have probably, an inch or so of droop, and that's pretty good. And it depends on the shock location and stuff. But the biggest issue with the Slash, or I'm sorry, the third biggest issue with the Slash, is there's not enough droop in the front. If your suspension can't come down that far, you're basically not going to be able to land jumps very well because you don't have enough suspension travel. Now, why does the Slash not have enough suspension travel in the front? In my opinion, Traxxas basically kind of cheaped out, basically designing this truck. They're reusing the shocks from the buggy, from the stadium truck, basically the Wrestler and the Bandit. They didn't want to add on new parts. They're still using those weird offset wheels. So they basically kept the front suspension travel the same as basically the buggy and the stadium truck, even though the short course truck really needs more suspension travel. And so what you'll find is basically with less suspension travel, it just chassis slaps a lot in the front. You have to play some games to try to get as much of that travel back and as much of that, sort of shock absorption back in the front as you can. So kind of a long way talking about why are my shocks mounted in the front. And what I recommend is basically go inner holes on the top and the bottom. That'll give you the most amount of droop. It's not really ideal for other things like shock progression and stuff, but inside on top and bottom will give you the most amount of droop and basically mitigate that issue as much as possible. So just run that, and you basically have to tune springs and shock wheels to match. I'm running low C black 2-inch springs up front with 37.5 weight associated oil up front. You could probably run blue springs as well if you're on a little bit bumpier or less traction surface, and I think you could also try 40 weight oil up front, but I'm running 37.5 weight oil, stock pistons, stock everything else, and then the low C black springs. And then on the rear, one other thing on the front, actually camber link location, it's got 3 holes here, right? Stock location is actually the middle hole. I found that the roll was actually not very well matched front to back, so I actually went up a hole to the top hole. So that actually gives you a little more roll in the front, actually, which gives you a little more sting, a little more traction entering and kind of mid corner in the corners. So you can play with that, but that's what I found to be the best for my truck. It kind of matches the front rear a little better that way. And then in the back of the truck, shock position wise, once again for droop purposes only, you can really only mount the shocks, here I'll kind of flip it over, on that second to inside hole or the inside hole. You really can't go to these outside 2 holes because it limits your droop too much. With the way the shock is, your length, it's going to minimize how far your arms can extend, and so just don't even use those 2 holes. Try the second hole. That seemed to work best for me. Gives you the right amount of droop. And then shock wise, basically I'm running low C 2.5-inch blue springs in the rear. That's the stiffest that they make. I'm running basically one of these sort of medium-sized spacers. And then shock weight oil, I'm running 35 weight associated oil, and that seems pretty much perfect. So I forgot to talk about the shock sort of preload spacers up front, but I got a tiny one and then like a number 2 spacer, so the smallest and the second smallest spacer up front. Actually, I'm only running the second smallest. I got rid of the smallest, so just basically a number 2 spacer up front. Yeah, that's pretty much the shock mounting stuff. You can kind of play around with the shock position up top. I moved it to the outside, kind of actually stiffens up the shock rate a little bit, the effective rate essentially. But I don't think it makes a big difference inside or out. You could play with both. And then the last thing is basically the rear camber mount on the hubs. Obviously you can see I'm in the top center hole. I would say pretty much that hole or the outside hole are the 2 you want to look at. They kind of like raise the roll center a little bit, so like I was saying with the front tends to roll not quite enough, especially with the stiff springs I'm running to kind of mitigate the landing. And then the rear kind of rolls a little bit more. So raising it actually makes the roll center higher and actually makes it roll a little bit less in the rear. And then on the shock tower, there's actually 3 mounting positions. A little bit hard to see here, but I've got it in the bottom hole, which actually matches the bottom hole in the original tower. So they kept the bottom 2 holes and then they added a 3rd hole up top, which honestly I think you'll never use. So stick probably to the bottom one, maybe the middle one, if you need a little more roll, but that top one I would just ignore. So yeah, that's pretty much my analysis of the Protrac suspension kit. Overall, $63, $65. I think it's worth it for the adjustments and for the tire selection or really wheel selection alone. Excuse me, it's had a little too much to drink. Yeah, so I think it's a good kit. I think it builds the foundation. I really wouldn't mess with your shocks and your springs and stuff like that until you kind of get the baseline for what you're looking for in this truck. And for me, the LCG chassis is number one. Number two, the Protrac suspension. Now it gives me basically the foundation. You know, it's kind of like you're building a house. You got the foundation, and then you got kind of the framework in which you're going to now develop your truck, right? So that's upgrade number two. That's my review. And I think it's a good modification. I can't say you have to do it. You know, if you're willing to live with the stock wheel offsets and tires and stuff like that, and you just don't care about adjustments, then maybe you're okay sticking with the stock arm and stuff. You know, definitely another advantage of the stock stuff is you can get replacement parts anywhere, whereas the Protrac stuff, if you break an arm, you're going to have to, you know, buy a Proline part, which your local hobby store may or may not carry. I'm actually considering buying just a complete another set so that I have a replacement part for every single part. Which would be nice, you know, if I break a shock tower or Camber link or whatever, you know, I'll have a spare. It's not a lot of money, you know, sort of 63 bucks. I think it's worth it. I don't think it's a must-have, like your truck will suck without it. But to me, actually, one of the really nice, surprising thing is you can get a little more adjustment, a little more tuning, and get the truck to work a little bit better overall with those adjustments. So that, the shock tuning, the decent tires, and you know, I dropped a second off my lap times, so I'm pretty happy with it overall. And that's pretty much it for the Protrac suspension kit. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already, or dislike the video if you thought it sucked, whatever. Please add comments. You know, I love comments, actually. I enjoy hearing what you guys think. And thank you for watching. Look for more videos soon. I've got a number 3 upgrade in the works. Hope to have a preview video of that, you know, not too long from now. And we'll see what we have in store. Thanks for watching, guys, and take care.